I hope this video does not help you in any way, because that would mean you haven't been misled by other production tutorials. You're doing a lot of things right, so bring it in. However, based on my own experience and going through my students' projects, I bet you're also wasting time on these same misleading tips. And there's only one way to find out. Let's go through them. Techno Moose, spin the wheel.
Let's go.
This is going to be a good one, because this is one I still see in a lot of other production tutorials. So you want your sound to be super wide, and you were told to duplicate that sound, put one left, put one right, and that should make it wide, correct? You be the judge.
It ain't real. You're all pretend. It ain't real. You're all pretend. It's a game until there's nothing left.
This is a misleading tip because it doesn't always make your sound wider. You can hear it and see it in this example. Now, it actually can work if you have a good understanding of what makes something wide in your headphones or in your speakers. You have a left channel and a right channel, and when those are playing the exact same signal at the exact same time, we hear that down the middle. Mono. But what happens if we change the timing of those two similar signals? Notice the right channel is slightly delayed, and this is causing the sound to be wider.
It ain't real. You're all pretend. It's a game until there's nothing left.
So then what happens if we undo the delay, but create changes to the actual sound?
It's a game until there's. It's a game until there's. It's a game until there's. It's a game until there's.
Notice it got wider. The key to making something sound wide is having differences between those left and right channels. When you just duplicate your sound and put one left, put one right, a lot of the time it's the exact same signal in both ears, in both channels. So how can you make this work? Because it can. When dealing with audio, and think maybe like drums or vocals, instead of putting the same sample left and right, maybe you try another sample opposite of the original one you started with. For example, one hi-hat to the left and a different hi-hat sample to the right. If you're working with vocals, this is where having the extra takes or harmonies can help. You can pan those left and right, and because there are subtle differences in the pitch and timing, it's going to make your vocal sound wide. Now with synths, this could be even easier because variation is much more common within the oscillators or through post-processing and effects. You can force differences between the same preset for subtle width, or you could have two completely different presets, one left, one right, and that would be much wider. Main takeaways, you need differences between both channels. All right, back to the wheel. Give it a spin, Moose Man. Have you ever spent way too much time trying to get your mix to sound amazing in mono? Because the mono mix is so important, right? Yo, I'm being dead serious. It's 2025. How often do you find yourself listening to music in mono or on mono speakers? 99% of your audience is going to consume your music in stereo. This makes it way more important than your mono mix. Now, I don't want you to think that a mono mix is completely irrelevant and it doesn't matter, because even in a wide stereo mix, you're still gonna have elements that sit in the middle, in mono. And that's how you should think about this. Great mixes have great balance, so that means narrow and wide. Think about where a lot of focal points sit. Nice and strong in the center. Kick, bass, vocals. But to sit there and try and get your entire mix to collapse and sound great in mono, you're probably wasting time. All right, Moose, spin the wheel, but can you please switch up the music and choose a different... If you've ever dealt with your bass not coming through on smaller speakers, think laptops or earbuds, you've definitely come across this tip. Saturate your sub so it will translate on small speakers. So you say to yourself, nice, this must be easy. But then you do it, and one of two things typically happens. First, you put on some saturation and realize this sounds exactly the same, there's no difference. Or you overdo it, and now your clean sub sounds like a distorted 808. And yes, this does translate on a small speaker, but it sounds nothing like what you wanted your bass to originally sound like. This tip is misleading because it does make sense. Saturation can add more volume to your signal in that area of the lows and low mids, but saturation is often a very subtle effect. So if you do have this clean sine wave sub, let's say, and you wanted to hear the saturation, you have to overdo it. For certain genres, this works sound design wise, but for many others, it doesn't. And if you're one of those people, you might be better off taking the concept, but getting there in a different way. Instead of adding that volume and frequency through saturation, let's add it through another layer. This gives you far more control because you could adjust the timbre and sound, the level of it, the frequency, where it even sits in the stereo field. Here's an example where I'm going to use an extra layer to help my bass translate in the mix. And we'll use this low cut on my master to really simulate a shit speaker that would have no bass. Now keep in mind, if you were mixing someone else's song and you didn't have the ability to go in there and produce other layers, then yes, saturation might be your best option at that point. And that's why I also think it's important to understand who you're getting tips from. If it's a mix engineer versus a producer, the approach is going to be very different. You need to find the one that works best for you. Moose, before you spin the wheel, please listen to me and change the We're gonna make this next one short and sweet. Have you ever heard that your mix needs to hit -6 or -8 before you send it to mastering? Look, there's no magic number. -6, -8, -0.01. There's no benefit to any of those numbers outside of the headroom that they give you. The reason a mastering engineer might ask you for -6 is to make sure you're nowhere near 0 in clipping. But at the end of the day, whatever level your song is when you send it to them, they can get it to -6 or -8 or whatever they'd like by just adjusting the clip gain. So please don't waste any more time on this. Just give yourself some headroom and move on. Back to the wheel and Moose. Nice spin, dude. We got the mystery tip. What is it?
In the arms of the angels may you find some comfort here. So tired.
All right, I don't know what that was, so I'm just gonna spin the wheel moving on. This next one is bringing us back to a familiar place. We're going back to the world of mono, and specifically these mono maker buttons or these mono maker knobs. The premise here is that anything under this frequency cutoff will be brought to mono. Well, that's awesome, right? We always hear that our kick, bass, and low end needs to be in mono, so just slap it on your sound, slap it on your master, and you should be good, right? When you click this button, yes, everything underneath will be brought to mono, but you're potentially just putting a band-aid on a bigger problem rather than fixing it. Let me explain. One way this is often used is when you have a stereo bass layer, but you just want the bottom part of it, the sub part, to be mono. This can do that, but take a look at what's happening to the sub. Notice it's pumping in volume. This dynamic change is going to create inconsistencies in your low end, which may not be good for the mix. Imagine your sub just like randomly fluctuating in volume. It's not like a sidechain pump. So instead, build your sub to be mono. You could have it on its own layer or even its own oscillator. One of my favorite tricks in Serum is to remove the fundamental frequency in my main oscillator that has the stereo low end, and then I could make it up in a separate oscillator using one voice, keeping it mono, and look at the difference. Dude, can you wait for me? If you've ever come across a tutorial that's basically a sales pitch telling you that this plugin is what's going to make your mix and master loud, or this one specific technique is going to make your shit loud, well, you were being sold, because that's not the truth. I want to show you the actual way to have loud and clean mix and masters. And look, being honest with you, it's not necessarily easy. It's a lot, but it's possible. Let's talk about the specific moves you would need to make to get there.